It's March 21st, 2012, and tonight joining me is Mr. Seth Clifford from the...
Hello, Georgia.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm good. And also joining me is the editor-in-chief of iMore, the man himself, Rene.
How you doing? What's going on, Georgia? What's happening?
Well, let's take a look at this. Here we go. Here it is, the new iPad. And it's beautiful, yes. Let's talk a little bit about the technology in this.
All right, so is this our official iMore podcast, the new iPad review?
This is the review on the iPad.
Nice.
The beauty of it all. So let's talk tech. How good is the Retina display, Seth?
Oh, it's pretty darn good, I gotta say. I thought it was going to be nice, and then when I finally got the iPad and booted it up and bathed in its wonderful luminescent glow, ooh, that was really something.
Is that why you're so tanned?
Yeah. It's actually, well, yeah, you know. We'll get into the warming of the stuff later.
So for me, it was...
This is like 4 times as many pixels, a little bit more than 4 times as many pixels as what was in the iPad 2.
It's exactly 4 times, and it's in the same space, which is the crazy thing. I mean, for every 1 pixel...
700,000 to 3.1 million.
Yeah, for every single pixel you had on the iPad 2, you now have 4 on it. Like, they actually basically cut them into 4 for this iPad. And to me, people have made different analogies. Some people said it's like putting on your glasses, and I have Coke bottle glasses, so for me that wasn't as impressive. But it was like going from standard definition video to high definition video, like going from cheap newspaper newsprint to a glossy magazine. It's something you really can't appreciate until you see it, mostly because you can't show an iPad display on anything but an iPad display. Nothing else is dense enough outside of like some medical imagery or something.
And that sounds like such a ridiculous thing to say, like, you can't, you have to see it to believe, you know, like that kind of perspective. But truthfully, when the Retina display hit the iPhone, it was great. And we were like, wow, this is really crisp. And I kind of expected it to just be extrapolated up to the iPad, like, oh, wow, it's just as good. It's so much better because of its size and because of what you can do with it. And just, it's astounding how good it is.
I don't know if you had the same experience as me, Georgia, but when I had the iPad at first, I loved it because it was so much bigger and more expansive, and I called it an iPhone on IMAX. But then the iPhone 4 came out, and the screen was so clear that I went back to reading on that, just because even though it was tighter and smaller, it was still so much nicer. But now I've got that same crispness and clarity on that giant screen again, and I'm just reading everything on the iPad.
Well, I usually read on the iPad anyways, but I do appreciate that when I'm looking at typeface, it's as crisp and clean as it really possibly could be. And if you look at games that are Retina display or even like Infinity Blade 2, it really does make a difference. It's nice to see how beautiful and crisp it is.
I would go so far as to say it's transformative. It's like one of those things where technology leaps ahead. Like when you went to HD TV, when you went to high-quality glossy magazine print, you kind of look back. You know, like when TV shows were crappy 20 years ago, and they didn't look crappy at the time, but now you watch them, and the lighting's not the same, and the quality's not the same. It's one of those things that you don't really notice it until you get it, and then it's hard to go back again.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the other differences in tech. So the cameras, it's 1080p, 5 megapixels. And then we also have that it has the A5 chipset. We got the quad graphics running dual processing chipset that will be able to handle everything that this iPad will be able to do, though does not actually make it much faster in loading web pages, we've noticed.
Yeah, and that's an interesting trade-off. And it took us a while because George and I did a bunch of tests. And Seth, this is my takeaway. And it goes into that Jonathan Ive interview that we spoke about on Iterate yesterday. Apple didn't make, like this iPad is not thinner. It is not lighter. And it is not perceptibly faster. Like you can quibble and say that some games will benefit from the extra graphics, and that's true. But from a user experience standpoint, it's not faster. But in every way, it is better. It is the iPad 2 just better because of the screen, because of the radios, because of the camera. And they made that trade-off. And I think it was the right one in the end.
Yeah. It definitely is. The whole experience of having the apps on a bigger screen and having, the UI be so expansive, it's it's cool because the things that we liked about the original iPad and the kinds of new things that it showed us are so much more enhanced and at the risk of descending into hyperbole, it seems so much more immersive because you're not distracted by the edges of the screen and the pixels and things like that. And it's just so crisp. And as apps get updated, like Netflix just got updated today,
Ooh.
and I just updated it now and just took a look at it. It is spectacular. I mean, it's just so nice. And I remember seeing a tweet like about an hour ago that was retweeted by somebody, and it said the app is updated. The new graphics are in HD video. A requisite HD video coming soon, something to that effect. So it's just gonna get so good so fast as people jump on this, and it's really exciting.
So so good, so fast, and so hot. Or is it, Rene?
Are we getting to the heat already?
Let's do it.
All right, so yeah.
Can I cook an egg on an iPad?
No, so I mean
I read one report that it can get as hot as 116 degrees.
So yeah, can we talk about LTE before we talk about the heat? Because I think it kind of plays into all of it.
Let's do it.
So the LTE is the other thing. I mean, they made the network connection so much faster. We did a bunch of tests, and I got between 15 megabits per second, which is respectable, to like close to 60 megabits per second, which is faster than my home internet.
Right.
And I have fast home internet. I think I have DOCSIS 4, not the most expensive kind, but I have really good internet. It's ridiculous. I was streaming video with absolutely it started immediately. It never lagged. I was tethering. And Seth and I had this discussion because Seth actually returned his non-LTE iPad to get one because it is so much better to tether to an LTE iPad because of battery life and speed than it is to an iPhone or anything else.
Yeah, initially I had ordered the Wi-Fi only model, the 32 gig Wi-Fi only, and I was like, I just got my iPhone, I'll tether to that, it'll be fine. And it occurred to me that the best possible scenario for me would be to really take back the Wi-Fi only iPad and get the LTE iPad. Yes, Verizon. People are asking in the chat room. I got the Verizon one because I have an AT&T phone. I wanted to cover my bases. I realize it's not as fast, but I don't really need the speed as much as I need the ubiquitous data coverage. So that's the long and short of it. But yeah, I took it back. I got the Verizon one, and I've been seeing, not as fast as AT&T, but solid speeds. I mean, like hovering around 20 just about everywhere I go. Yeah. And I've only done a couple of tests. I have not pushed it as far as you have this past weekend.
And Georgia got the Wi-Fi version, but even the HSPA Plus is good.
Right, because I don't use my iPad outside of the home.
Yeah.
Ever. Now, Seth, do you take your iPad with you when you go places? Like, will that be your device if you go to, say, Starbucks and want to work for a little while there or something?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try to carry it more. Like, since we've got the LTE and it is really good, I think I'm going to try to actually do what Rene has done and kind of make the iPad my main device and keep my phone as, the communication platform, because it's so much nicer to use now because of both the speed and the screen. And obviously, I went from a first-gen iPad to this one, so there's a noticeable jump in performance for me that, a lot of people may not be experiencing because they had the iPad too. So the whole experience is great. And I think what I'm going to try to do is I'm actually going to try to take the stuff that I can do on the iPad and really do it there and just see how it works. I still need my full laptop and my, desktop setup with a monitor and a mouse for a lot of things, but I plan on becoming more mobile with this thing, and I plan on taking it places and just, really not forcing myself to use it, but trying to experience it that way.
Jessica in the chat room is saying that even her 3G speeds are faster, and that's true because it's got a much better HSPA Plus radio. It's got a dual one, actually. So instead of capping out at like 14.4, it can theoretically go to 42. And I usually get like 5 or 8 at best, and I'm getting 16 on HSPA Plus with the new iPad.
Well, interestingly enough, one of my coworkers who's not exceptionally techie has just purchased an iPad, and primarily for the use of being able to use it as a hotspot.
Yeah.
So that she will be able to work and have internet connection at the same time.
Which you
And
can't
she's
do on
thrilled
AT&T yet,
just
by
for
the way.
that.
Right.
Pardon me?
And
AT&T is not offering that yet, so just be aware of that.
yeah, and speaking of the hotspot, that was the other thing that Rene and I had talked about kind of briefly on, I guess it was Sunday that I went back to the mall. He made a good point. You know, it was something I thought about but kind of dismissed. He said, I would much rather tether to the iPad with that monster battery and run that thing down and still have my phone when I need it than have to worry about my phone battery getting run down. And then, you know, what am I going to do with the iPad? I can't make calls with it.
They're asking about battery life. I usually tethered to my phone before, and after a couple hours, my phone would be, very, very low. I tethered to the iPad for a couple hours, 3-4 hours. It was like 4% down. It was much, much better than an iPhone.
Yeah.
Right. So let's go back to LTE. Rene, you did a look at how hot can the iPad get. And again, we've heard that there were some news stories that it could get to 116 degrees, which is cooking hot.
But the thing with these stories that just gets my goat, that makes me crazy, is that these are such. They're such Apple link-baity stories. It's the same thing with AntennaGate. Like, AntennaGate was, yes, a real problem, but it also created a lot of buzz for sites like Consumer Reports who don't usually get a lot of attention. And I think people know that when Apple's in the headline, they get a lot of hits, they get quoted a lot, they get invited on a lot of mainstream media programs. So they're more, I'm not saying there aren't problems, but people are paying more attention to them than they might otherwise. So we measured the heat. And the problem I have with these stories is they didn't offer context. Yes, the iPad gets warm, but compared to what? Because my iPhone gets really hot. Like when it's on AT&T looking for a signal, it gets hot. When I'm tethering, it gets hot. If I'm using GPS or turn-by-turn, it gets hot. And my MacBook, if it's running Flash, is so hot I cannot put it on my lap. And I've never seen giant Consumer Report stories about these.
Yep.
So for me, it was just the context. And I think the only reason it stands out is because the first two iPads were so freakishly cool no matter what they did. And now they finally put the technology in that they're warm like everything else.
Now, would this just be warm, though, Rene? You did the test. So mine hasn't been warm. I don't have LTE. I'm using Wi-Fi. I haven't been playing some exceptionally graphic-intensive games. I've played some Infinity Blade, but not for hours on end. So am I going to have to worry about that happening at all with my iPad, or is this only for LTE?
No, it's actually, I don't think it's LTE at all, actually. I think it's the A5X chipset, and it seems to happen when it's like doing a lot of hardcore graphics. If you're like running like modern combat for 30 minutes over AirPlay, or even Infinity Blade over AirPlay, where it's displaying on the iPad and on the TV set, and the brightness is on full, and you're basically maxing it out. It's like driving a car on Redline. It'll get warm-ish. Ours never got that hot. It got about as hot as an iPhone gets when its radios are firing off, and it didn't get anywhere near as hot as a MacBook. So it's possible some people might have got defective units, and Apple put out a statement saying if you did, bring them back to the Apple Store. But for everyday use, it's a silly thing. I mean, it's not silly. It's real, but it's not worth the headlines people are giving it.
Well, that's a little bit about the technology behind the iPad, but really what the iPad is about is the user experience. And Seth, what have you found about the user experience that makes this iPad better?
Well, for me, there's a couple things. Obviously, the screen is impeccable. It makes, all the reading and viewing of content that I do on it that much more enjoyable. Stuff like Instapaper that is pretty much strictly text is, like, that stuff really shines now. There's anything that has, great fonts looks even better. Anything that, is tailored and carefully designed looks that much better. So the screen is a big thing. The other thing for me that I noticed, and I mentioned this briefly on Twitter, was that on the iPad 1, when I enabled the gestures, it never seemed to be really responsive. And basically, they're saying I'm echoing in the chat room. I don't know if I am. I can't hear any echo on my side.
I can't.
Do you guys hear an echo?
No, but I'll never hear it.
They're saying it's a good echo, like I'm powerful.
I'll turn it on too.
They're saying it happens when I go full screen. I didn't mean to derail the show, but I just need to mention it.
Yeah, that's good that you mentioned it, actually, because echo bad.
All right, so take me off full screen. Put me back on the 3 up there, and I'll just talk.
Yeah, I'll poke at Seth while he's chatting.
That's Great, thank you.
Just trying to be helpful.
All right. So basically, as I was saying, gestures on my iPad 1 never seemed responsive enough to use, and it felt really kind of kludgy, and I kept going back to the home button. But I have been really digging gestures on this thing because it's very, very snappy, and I don't think I've missed a single kind of five-finger pinch back to the springboard or swipe up to get the fast switch tray, and back and forth to the left and right to flip between apps. It's very quick and it's very responsive. So that's something cool that I've discovered that I really wasn't using before because it just didn't kind of meet any kind of performance for me. It was just very strange. Aside from that, the LTE is great. Like that is the other thing that is really cool. It's like having Wi-Fi when you don't have Wi-Fi. It really is. It's better than some of the Wi-Fi you'll find in public.
And then you'll find at home.
Yeah, truthfully, yeah.
Rene, have you been doing anything with the camera and with iPhoto, and how is that?
I very wisely left that to our resident photography expert, Leanna Lofty, and she took it out for a very thorough spin. My take on it is this. No one is going to be using this as a primary camera, but it does kind of follow the same best camera analogy. That if it's all you, like, let's say you're sitting there, you're enjoying, like you're reading the web or you're reading an iBook and your kid does something delightful or Sasquatch runs across your line of sight, something happens that you need to take a picture quickly and you happen to have your iPad there, it's really nice that you can finally take a decent picture or take some decent video. So it's opportunistic photography. It's not, I don't think anyone's going to go out on a photo haunt with that giant camera, like with a hood over the back, like the old days. But the fact that it has a camera and it's a decent camera, I think, is important.
And again, because I'm primarily relatively lazy, having the iPad there and being able to not have to find my phone if I'm using it, it's nice to be able to take a photo with that. The stabilizer, anyone take a peek into that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's basically, it's the exact same camera as the iPhone 4S, but at the resolution of the iPhone 4. And I think that's important too. Like if you're a real estate agent and your iPad is your business tool, or if you're using it for anything and you want to take a picture of a document, or you want to take video of, let's say you're an insurance adjuster, you want to take video of damage to a house, you can do all that now in fairly good quality and not have to worry about a secondary device.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's not going to replace either a decent camera or, let's say, your 4S for taking really good pictures if that's what you're used to doing. But the utility of having a functional and decent camera on there definitely helps out with some apps. I was thinking about things like scanning documents, like you said, or if as part of a utility for an application, it's just good to be able to know that your images that you capture are going to be usable and you're not going to look at them later and be like, why did I even bother?
I can't even read that whiteboard. Now I'm going to get fired.
Right. And for web browsing, we did a speed test in between, which we mentioned before, in between the iPad 2 and the new iPad, the iPad 3, whatever you so wish to call it. And we found that the web was not any faster for the next generation of iPad, which is something that I was hoping for, though. With that many pixels that they're having to push, it's pretty impressive that it's able to keep up with the iPad 2 with such a low resolution in the first place.
It's doing 4 times the work at the same speed, which, like, I mean, you don't notice that, but that's pretty impressive performance. And it goes back to me with the spec versus experience thing. And it's so much nicer to read and look at pictures and stuff with that display and with the faster internet, like a cellular radio connection, if that's what you're using, that the experience is much better, even though I don't know if that makes sense, even though the raw performance of of WebKit and Nitro isn't really improved as far as we know.
No. And they didn't really have a choice, did they, Rene? They had to make sure that this iPad performed at least at the same speed as the iPad 2, because that would have been, for me, that would have made that would have broken it. I wouldn't have gotten the next generation of iPad if it was slightly slower, because that's one of the annoyances of waiting for a very large page to have to deal with. I think that would have been, it was essential that they were able to at least keep up with the pace of the iPad 2, because even waiting for a couple of seconds for a page to load, I'm like getting antsy.
Well, so that's the thing. I mean, you can never, ever do everything. Everything has an opportunity cost and has compromises, and Apple chose specific compromises. They wanted that screen. They wanted to have that screen in the new iPad. and they also couldn't allow the performance to go below the iPad 2. So the compromise was slightly thicker, slightly heavier, gets slightly warmer. And they were okay with that because they figured that that was the lesser of the two evils in this case. And I think they made the right choice. I think the experience is better.
Yep.
Yes.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're sitting holding your tablet of choice and you're using it, what are you really thinking about? Are you thinking about, boy, I'm so glad I have an extra core or a couple more, notches on the clock speed? Or are you thinking, I'm really glad I can look at these pictures and it's fluid and it responds to my touch? It's all about experience. Otherwise, why are we using these things? We're not using them to brag about them. We're using them because they're interesting and captivating devices.
Yeah, it's like we know when printing, when books finally, because a long time ago they used to illuminate books by monks, and very few people had them. And then there was a technology revolution, and there was a printing press, and people were impressed by the art of putting lead character. I mean, it was a very technical thing. And tablets and computers, they were very technical. But I think we're getting to the point where we can just enjoy them as media now and not worry about the technology so much.
Yeah.
There are, though, some issues that have come up.
Oh, wait, before you do that, I want Seth's take on music.
Ah.
And I want your take on gaming. I'm not ready to go to problems yet. You're rushing me.
Okay. Sorry.
All right, my take on music is that, as with everything else, the good of it is gonna get gooder. I can't wait to spend. I know it was terrible. I can't wait to spend some quality time with GarageBand and AmpKit and a couple other of the apps that I have downloaded for my original iPad that I haven't used in a while. And obviously, with the processor bump for me and the screen upgrade, it's just gonna be a much nicer thing to play with. And I'm thrilled. Like I said, I'm going to try to integrate it more into, my daily stuff so that when I do have ideas, I like take the time to actually get them down on the iPad and use it. And the more that I kind of spend time with those apps, I think the more that I will want to spend time with them, because I whenever I see cool stuff, I download it, and sometimes I get around to playing with it. Sometimes I'm like, I'll get to that at some point. But I'm really going to try to make an effort because of, especially for me personally, the big jump from the 1 to the 3, the hardware upgrade. I'm definitely going to try to make time and music for that matter.
Yeah, I see. I'm not a musician, so I can't. The only thing I can do is kind of equate it to video, and because the screen is bigger than 1080p, so you can watch 1080p in native resolution. And because the LTE is so fast, you can stream 1080p. I mean, and iMovie's gotten some updates, and you can do some fairly good movie editing. So I can only imagine that if you're musically inclined rather than video inclined, the differences, except the speaker, Georgia, the differences are just as palpable.
That hurt.
Well, no,
yeah.
They didn't fix you. They fixed me, not you. I understand.
I wouldn't be using the speaker. I'd be plugging in a good pair of headphones anyway.
Does that take away from the experience? I mean, Georgia was really bummed that the speaker didn't get improved. Does that take away from your musical enjoyment? I mean, she measured it with a decibel meter on her iPhone.
Does it take away anything?
Yeah.
No, because primarily if I'm using that speaker, it's probably honestly for a podcast. And if I'm using it for music, I'm probably using it for something like Pandora, and I'm not really in I want to immerse myself in music mode. I'm probably doing something, and the iPad is streaming music, and I'm just, I'm there. It's background for me. So it's not my primary, listening device for stuff like that. I have nice speakers all over the house that I can use for that if I really want to get into music. It's convenient. I look at it this way. Back when people carried transistor radios, those speakers were terrible, but it was the portability, it was the access, it was the convenience of the device that made it worth having. And that's the same thing with this for me. It's not, I don't think of this as like an HD audio output. This is just a convenient thing to have with me that has a lot of media that I can access. And the speaker, it is what it is, and it's good enough. I'd love it to be better, but I'm fine with it. If I really want to get into things, I can plug headphones in.
Do you have a lot of music on the iPad, George? I listen to almost all my music on the iPhone anyway.
I don't. I listen to all my music on my iPhone because I have that with me. So I almost never listen to music on my iPad, and that's not. I'm not really a musophile. It doesn't really have to be fabulous, but I would have liked that it was louder, because often I'm doing the little, you know.
Yeah.
Or even someone else had mentioned in the chat room last podcast was that even if the placement was a little bit different, would have been better if they could have had it placed in another way so that it wouldn't be leaning outwards away from us, but the same speaker as which it has, but leaning like, you know, so the sound is coming towards us.
You mean the screen and the speaker pointing in the same direction?
Yeah, yeah.
Crazy.
I know, crazy. I know.
What about gaming? Because I don't know if you're the biggest gamer among us, but you're one of them.
Well, if I can go back to kind of the sound for the music. So yeah, we tested them both out, and they had the same sound. Some people are saying that they reach the same decimal limits to playing the same amount of music, and I believe that they're actually the same speaker internally as well. Though, interestingly enough, a whole bunch of people are saying that it sounds louder to them, and that the bass is better, and it's a richer amount of tone. Though I believe that iFixit found that it was the exact same speaker.
It could be a placebo effect. The screen is so good, their brain is, yeah.
Exactly. It looks better, so food tastes better when it looks better. Perhaps it's the same thing that when it looks better, it sounds better.
Yeah, understood.
Gaming on the iPad, that is where it's at. Because of the Retina display, I'm so excited for the games that are going to be coming out. For the Infinity Blade game that's going to be out, it's amazing. Infinity Blade 2, phenomenal, beautiful, beautiful game, and so much more fun and fluid.
Real Racing 2, spectacular. What's that first-person shooter one I was playing and I just forgot the name already? Modern Combat 3. I mean, the stuff... Some people, there was a whole debate about whether it was console quality. For me, it's completely different than console, but the quality is, I mean, looking at the stuff, Seth, it looks phenomenal.
Yeah, that's one thing I haven't had a chance to go into the App Store and look at the games that they're featuring as, like, you know, Retina ready. I don't do a ton of gaming, but that's another thing that I'm kind of like, yeah, you know what? It wouldn't kill me to play some games and relax a little bit and have some fun on this thing. So I'm definitely going to be exploring stuff a little bit more, you know, soon, and I'm looking forward to seeing just how good some of these games look. I mean, the stuff in the demo obviously was fantastic during the keynote.
It will burn your eyes back to the back of your skull, Seth.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
And what I also liked was that they're also using different ways to interact with your screen, really using the graphics and being able to interact directly with the touchscreen instead of having just a D-pad, which every once in a while, again, my fingers kind of slip off because I don't see it. So
yeah, they're making more native control now.
Yes.
They're making instead of just porting over a game and making a virtual joystick, they're actually making games that are controlled with things that are natural on an iPad. It's great.
Though the having the Retina display does not actually help people be able to draw something, I have noticed.
Ouch. Well, they didn't increase, as far as we know, they did not increase the amount of multi-touch sensors in the display. The display looks better, but it has the same granularity when it comes to like understanding touch inputs. Still, I believe it's a 10-point maximum, and it's got the maximum granularity that it has. Nothing with that is improved.
Because if you're in comparison though to playing on your phone, it's so much easier to play in that the screen is larger in itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no difference than the iPad 2 experience for touch. That's a good point to make.
Did we cover reading enough? Do we have anything we want to add to reading? It's just the Retina display makes reading.
Yeah, Seth, you have a Kindle and you have used the iPad 2 and the old iPad. So what is it like reading on the new iPad in comparison with the Retina display?
It's pretty fantastic. My wife has an older Kindle, the last iteration of the keyboard Kindle, so I guess the gray one with the keyboard on it. So that's a standard e-ink. She loves it. She takes it everywhere. I can't really get into it. I can't dig on e-ink. I don't know what it is. Just looking at it makes me crazy. Maybe it's the font. I don't know. I have the Kindle Fire. I keep that next to the bed. That's what I do primarily most of my reading on because I read right before bed. That's kind of the routine. But in terms of other reading that I do, Instapaper, websites, RSS, whatever it is, it's just so crisp on this display. It's just amazing. And it's one of those things where you don't want to say something really dopey like, oh, it's...
Say it.
It's like electronic paper.
It
really
is.
It really is. It really is.
It's we took macro photographs. I put a macro lens on my iPhone and took macro photographs so you could see the difference in dot density, and it's really mind blowing. I mean, like I'll post the link up because you have to take a look at it. Text looks like printed paper text. It doesn't look like old, newspaper text anymore.
Yeah.
And people are also mentioning that the new iPad, is a little bit warmer and that they enjoy reading more on a warmer screen.
The color is, yeah, some people are...
It's a little bit more into the warm tones, a little bit more yellow, and that's a little less harsh for people.
It seems to vary a lot, though. I mean, we've had a lot of designers...
It's actually more, and maybe it's just because I haven't put them side to side to take a look, but I haven't noticed that it's anything noticeably more yellow.
Well, like I said, it seems to vary a lot. Like some people are getting units that are much more yellow, much more blue. The color temperature seems to have a lot of variance right now. We'll have to see if that's just the initial batch or if that's something that Apple's still playing around with.
Right.
Yeah, I've noticed that the first one I had was cooler than my iPhone, and this one seems cooler than the iPhone too. And I'm okay with it either way. Like, depending on my mood, I like warmer whites or cooler whites. So it's not that big of a deal for me. Plus, like you, Rene, I keep my brightness at about 30 to 40%. Not because I'm so concerned with battery life, but because this thing is like nuclear bright.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. If you turn this all the way up, you will sear your retinas completely. Like, your eyes will melt out of your skull.
You'll like walk into your house. If you look away from it, the room is dark. No matter how bright the room is, if you look away, the room is dark.
It's pretty crazy. I was actually running the battery down the other day just to kind of do my initial calibration / test to see how long it would last. And I had the brightness way up, and I couldn't even really look at it. I was just going through settings, and I was like, it's too much. I got to back away.
Yeah. No, it's absurd. Georgia, what are you showing us?
Just brightening up my
Oh, wow.
iPad.
It's like looking into the sun.
It is.
Yeah, there we go.
Nice. I felt warmer when you did that.
I enjoy like the fact that I can read and zoom, and it renders really well as well. So I have to say I enjoy that. For the issues.
Yes.
So we already spoke about the heat to the iPad. Rene, what did you find when you did your actual tong test?
Yeah, it's
Tong, not tongue.
It's no hotter than the iPhone and cooler than the MacBook Pro. So I mean, it is warmer than the original iPad, but only because the original iPad and the iPad 2 were freakishly cold.
Right. Okay. Now, the battery life is almost exactly the same.
Yes.
But Rene, you noticed something different with the charging.
Well, so we say the battery life is the same, but it's doing a lot more. So what Apple did to make it the same is it's a 70% higher capacity battery. And that means, like, if you have an almost double-sized gas tank, it's going to take you twice as long to fill that tank. So it's taking people twice as long to charge the iPad. That's physics. That's not, Apple messing anything up. Much bigger battery, much longer to charge. I just charge mine overnight now. Like, if I see it's getting close to 20%, 10%, I'll plug it in overnight. Then I don't have to worry about it.
So, yes, it takes longer to charge.
Yeah, roughly twice as long. Not quite, but roughly.
Yeah, I actually I ran mine down yesterday, and I plugged it in and checked it and kept track of it. And I plugged it in right around 7 o'clock. And at, I guess it was 9, I think it was like 40% full. So that's a lot slower than the old one used to charge. And based on that, I did some quick math and figured out that it would probably take between 5 and 6 hours to charge this thing fully. And that's not an insignificant amount longer than it would have taken the old one. However, I mean, like you said, it's physics. This is the trade-off. You have a bigger battery so that you can have the same battery life with more features. This is the way it is. The only thing they could have done was ship a different charger, a higher wattage charger with it. But, that's the way it is. Like you said, charge it overnight if you're worried about it. Don't even think about it.
Now, the one thing that might be a cause for concern for some people is that if you're doing incredibly intensive stuff like LTE, gaming, and everything, the same stuff that makes it warm, it might be using so much power that unless you're using a proper charger, you might not be able to like plug it into USB and actually charge it while you're running at full steam. So you want to pay attention to that. Can I talk about the other crazy headline of the day, Georgia?
Yeah, go for it.
The Wall Street Journal reported that if you use faster data, you will use up your data faster.
Oh, by the way, if you
Okay,
turn
so
your
wait.
faucet in your sink on a higher setting, more water may come out too.
If you buy a Ferrari, you might spend more on gas.
So dumb.
No, I don't mean to be mean, because there are some people who just don't think about it. I mean, it's not like they buy a new iPad, it's got LTE, they start streaming video, and they're so excited that video finally plays instantly and doesn't buffer. Because I think on the old devices, people would be upset. Like, it would stutter, it would buffer, and they'd just stop watching, and that saved them a lot of bandwidth. But now it's silky smooth, so they're probably sitting there, and 3 hours later, they don't realize they've burned through their entire AT&T 2 gigs. So it is an issue. It's just not a Wall Street Journal headline issue.
Fair enough.
No, you were going to say.
Wait, when it becomes a Consumer Reports issue, then it's an issue.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have to realize that if you use more data, you're going to go through your data faster, and maybe you need a higher cap, or maybe you need to get on Wi-Fi more.
If you use more data, you're going to use more data.
It really...
Yes, if you use more data, it's going to use more data. But if you watch the same video on the new iPad versus the iPad 2, it's the same video, it's the same amount of data.
Maybe. See, we don't know if Apple's giving you a higher quality video if you're using a 1080p iPad. They might actually... if people
get the video and you choose 1080p or something else, then...
It's not always, because they're using dynamic streaming that automatically adjusts based on your bandwidth. Like, I'm not sure if they're always using it, but it's possible that they're sending you higher quality video when they detect that you have a better quality device. So it's worth keeping an eye on.
Right. So when I'm watching my Flash videos... Oh, wait. No, that wouldn't make a difference.
Flash vid. Yeah. Was it? I think it was Ed. Was it Ed Baig who made that comment that it still doesn't support? Fair... My take on this is my mom doesn't know what Flash is, but she knows that some of her videos don't play. Georgia knows that some of the restaurant sites she goes to don't work. Some people know that the Flash-based interfaces for some games don't work. Adobe is not making Flash Mobile anymore. They gave up on it, partly because it was very difficult. It was originally designed for big, chunky desktop computers, and they started very late. If they had started 5 years ago to make it mobile optimized, maybe it would have worked. They waited a long time, ultimately gave up. But we posted a whole article with suggestions, Georgia. Like, you can use Skyfire and Skyfire will transcode the Flash video on their site and send it to you in an iPad-compatible format. You can use iSwifter, and they repackage a lot of the Flash games in a way that you can play them on your iPad. So there are several alternatives that you can try. And a lot of websites just serve HTML5 video now, and you don't have to worry about Flash. So it's not an entirely lost cause.
Well, it isn't, but it's still frustrating, if nothing else. The other thing that some people we were hoping for, and I think that we discussed before it came out that it might not actually be as useful, but that there is no Siri, but we did get dictation. Seth, were you sad about it? Or did you expect that Siri would not come to the iPad?
No, I didn't expect it. I figured that for the time being, at least for a variety of reasons, it would remain on the 4S alone. I'm pleased as punch that we have dictation, though, because that's extremely useful. Rene's done a couple of mock-ups of interfaces for what Siri could look like on the iPad. There's interface issues with how it gets handled, not to mention the fact that a lot of the apps that Siri plugs into are not present on the iPad by default the way they are on the iPhone. And there's always the consideration that it's still in beta, they're still scaling it, it still does fail out sometimes, and maybe it's just not ready to have that many more devices thrown at it. There's a whole variety of reasons why, but the dictation, having that there, for me, for my use cases, that's perfect.
I was sad that Siri was not on the new iPad. I had assumed that hopefully it would, but dictation, they didn't even believe enough in dictation to have it live during the keynote.
It works though. I mean, I've been using it a lot, and so far it's been really good for me.
Okay.
Have you tried it?
No.
Because it's not obvious. People aren't used to it because it wasn't on the old iPad. So if you had an old iPad, you just don't think about it. And for some reason, mine wasn't even on by default. I had to go into the settings and turn it on and agree to Apple's privacy policy to be able to use it. But once it was there, I'm just hitting that and talking.
I have to say I have one more issue with the iPad that's an old issue of mine.
Here we go.
Brought it up before. Wow. I would love to have a clock on my iPad.
Oh, okay.
That's one of
Oh, you
the
thought it was
yeah.
the speaker thing? Is that what you were going for?
No,
You
I didn't
surprised?
think it was the speaker thing. I thought it was your old horse that you keep beating that's been dead for a while.
I don't know. I think I rezzed that baby. But why is there no clock on the iPad? So even when we get Siri, it wouldn't be able to set reminders by time or an alarm. It would be great for people that are older to actually have this sitting on their desk and use it as a massive alarm.
Big ass clock.
Yeah.
That's what it should be called, you know. And then when Kevin is carrying his iPad around instead of his playbook, he'll have a special. He can actually have a clock on this. I couldn't even do
And
that.
he's doing the Flavor Flav.
So go ahead, Renee. Tell me what happened there.
This is a rumor. I think John Gruber reported this a couple of years ago. That there's no stocks, there's no weather, there's no clock, there's no voice recorder app because Steve Jobs did not like the way they looked on a big iPad screen. He thought they were little widgets and didn't scale to the right size, so he canned them.
So this was a form over function issue.
Well, it's the same thing. Like they believe that there's a certain experience, and if the app doesn't live up to what in their minds they want it to look like, they would rather not ship anything at all. But there's a lot of clocks you can buy in the App Store that look pretty good, and Apple's got really good interface designers. So
there are. It's just something that I think should come native.
Yeah.
On my iPad, it just seems ridiculous that I would even have to get it, and I think that part of me, I'm a little upset that they haven't already thought about putting this in. For the
2.5 years later, there's still no. Well, 2 years later, there's still no web apps,
Yes.
whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, it's just something I think would be nice.
The one that's the weirdest to me, though, I mean, even though I don't use it all that much, I feel like stocks is something that could be really, really translated well to this. I mean, it's data representation. Like you can't. There's got to be a way to do a stocks app that
A skeuomorphic way, Seth.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, all the stock tickers are made of candy canes and stuff. So, no, I mean honestly,
and it would be nice to have. Again, I like widgets. Steve Jobs doesn't, but to have it like when you're going through or you're getting some of the magazines, a lot of people I think would use it for looking at their stocks at the same time.
Agreed. Okay, you get that one, Georgia. We agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
Well done.
I agree with the clock thing. I think it's perfectly useful on the iPad.
Me too.
And
Apple, give us our widget apps. I shook my tiny Vader fist.
You don't have to make it a widget. You can make it look like whatever you want.
Yes.
Just let me use it. Let me put down my alarms.
Make it look like an old Braun clock. Do it.
Whatever it so may be. Whatever it so may be.
So can I ask you for your take, Georgia? What is if I was to ask you for your mini encapsulated iPad numero 12 review, what would it be?
Okay. It would be if you already have if you have the first generation of iPad, then this would be something that you might find and you use it a lot and you enjoy it and you would like to have a better experience with it, then this would be something that you may want to upgrade. If you have the iPad 2, short and straight, I would say you really don't need to get the iPad 3. I'm with Seth on his first gen to second gen jump, even though I was actually thinking that in between the first generation iPad to the second, it was a big jump. But I'm going to say the thing that you hate, but the jump in between the Retina display, though it is beautiful, the camera, amazing, LTE, quick as lightning, I would say it's not a necessary jump, and it's very expensive. It's not something that's subsidized, so I would say wait. So don't get it if you have an iPad 2.
If you have no tablet?
You have a first iPad, but if you're looking on the road for a tablet, hands down, there is no better tablet that is out there for the amount of money, user experience.
Now, the question we get asked a lot is it worth the extra $100 to get the new iPad as opposed to the iPad 2 now because that's been discounted?
Yes.
Yes, and we also, I ended up spending another extra $100, so it was actually $2, in order to get 32 over 16.
I think that's smart because I ran out on my 16 gigabyte iPad 2, and a lot of
the Retina apps.
Yeah.
You might as well go ahead and get it. And if you're going to be taking a lot of photos, showing them AirPlay,
1080p movies,
that would be useful.
Yeah, I think you were smart.
I went from a first gen to this iPad. It's an incredible jump. The reason I didn't get the iPad 2, simply put, was that I really wanted a Retina display. I didn't think that the processor bump and the size difference in the iPad 2 were compelling enough to make that jump. Now that the Retina display is here, it's fabulous. It's really, really a great upgrade. If you, as we said, if you have no tablet, this is an excellent place to start, probably the best place to start. If you have an iPad 1 and you like it, a great jump. Trust me, it is. If you have an iPad 2, Georgia does have a point. You probably don't need to go to this, but if you do a lot of reading on it, if you really enjoy using it and you have the money to upgrade, you won't be sorry, because the jump from the 3GS to the 4 was so pleasant because of that screen. This is just this. It's the same thing. It's going to enhance the experience that much more.
Can I state something just for the record? And I'm going to get flamed. Send it all to Seth. If I did not do this for a living, I would have been slightly disappointed with the jump from the iPad 2 to the new iPad. Oof, there we go.
Disappointed in what?
Because
what would you have
cost? Because of the difference.
But what would you have
cost.
wanted instead? So like, what would have made you not disappointed?
If I had a clock, if I had better speakers, the sound was actually more. Even if it was louder, I would be happier with that. And the other thing is that it's not actually any faster.
But did you need faster? Was it too slow?
I would have enjoyed, again, when my web pages load, I'm actually waiting for them. If it loaded faster, I would have a better user experience, and that would have made it worth it for me. But it doesn't.
So if it didn't have a Retina display, but it was faster, would that have been a better upgrade?
Better might not be the right word, but it would be another way that would increase my user experience, and faster does make a difference for me.
So you prefer faster to sharper, like you prefer the faster speed of the device to the way that the actual stuff looks on the screen. I mean, that's totally valid. I'm just curious.
It would be a toss-up, but yes, faster would have been something I would have enjoyed more. It doesn't look as great. It wouldn't sell as many iPads, so I understand why they wouldn't go with that, but I would have enjoyed it more.
So speed is important to you, but experience is not.
Well, speed is experience for her.
Experience for me, because when I'm surfing, like I'm going to a web page and I'm having to wait for a very expansive web page to load, it takes a long time and I get stressed during that period of time. So I will sometimes switch. And again, sometimes I'll switch because I can use Flash. There are ways around it.
Well, no, some people will watch lower res video because it's faster, and they won't watch the highest version available because they don't want to wait for it. I mean,
I don't have a lot of free time. So the free time that I have, I want to watch and get as much out of it as I can, and waiting for pages to load. Or heaven forbid I press something that I shouldn't and I load up another page and then I have to head back and reload it. That freaks me out. So yes.
Yeah, that's valid.
Yeah.
What about you, Rene?
Yeah, so here's my take. I agree with a lot of what both of you said. I would say that there is a caveat, though, on the iPad 2 to the iPad 3. And it's, obviously there's people who do this for a living like we do. But yeah, if you're like a normal, sane individual, you probably won't go from an iPad 2 to an iPad 3. That's a given. But if there was a specific issue you had with the iPad 2, if you had a pain point or a problem, for example, if you travel and work on the road a lot and the 3G internet was just not fast enough, or if you are particularly sensitive, like some people have golden ears, some people are particularly sensitive to the quality of typeface and the quality of images. Maybe you're a photographer or you're a typesmith. You're something in that vein. The quality of the screen might be important to you enough that you want to upgrade. So if you had a specific issue and this fixes it, then it's still a worthwhile upgrade as long as you can afford it. I think in general, though, this is what Georgia identified is the key problem Apple has with this iPad, is that it is an absolutely transformative leap forward. It's something that it's like almost a dividing line, like when you had high DPI devices and now you have post high DPI devices, and in a few years everything will look like this and we'll barely remember when there were chunky pixels on devices anymore. But that's a hard sell to normal people. It's like not everyone bought a 1080p TV when they were 10 grand or when they were 7 grand or 3 grand. It took a long time for that to become mainstream technology. Yes, video geeks bought them, and I bought one early, and I went from 720p to 1080p because it mattered to me. And seeing Lord of the Rings in high definition for the first time was utterly fantastic to me. And that's what I feel like with the new iPad. That's not a mainstream thing. So I think it was important that Apple did this. I think they'll bring the whole industry with them. We'll all benefit eventually. But I think just what you guys said, it's not an immediate. It's a nice to have, not a have to have. It's a need, it's a want more than a need. I hate agreeing with you people this much. It makes it much less argumentative and much less dramatic.
Just give into it.
Yeah. So. If you don't have an iPad, this is a fantastic one. I'd get the 3 over this 2 in a heartbeat. If you have a 1, I would update. It's a much better experience. If you have a 2, it has to fix a very specific problem where there's no point in upgrading.
Bless you, Georgia.
Bless you. Was that you agreeing with me by sneeze?
So there we have it. I think that is a pretty good update to what is the experience for the iPad. Is there anything we missed?
Can we agree that it's the best iPad ever?
Certainly.
I would go further to say that it's the best tablet out there.
Yeah, I agree.
For the money, for the experience, for what you get.
It's crazy because a couple of years ago, this was Star Trek. Like, you would never, if I had told Seth that he would have 2048 by 1536 Retina display in his hands going 50 megabits per second down, and pushing that many pixels, he would have looked at me like I was stupid.
He'd be like, what?
Oh. Yeah.
No, not stupid per se, but probably unstable.
Yeah, and now we're holding it like now they sold 3 million of them. I mean, it sounds fanboyish, and I hate saying it, but in a lot of ways, Apple is driving the future of consumer electronics right now. I mean, they're just taking it and running with it as fast as they can. And they'll stumble eventually, but I hope it's not for a while, because I really want all the next crazy things that they think of.
I love tech, so I hope everyone, I'm waiting for my phone, like watch phone. Waiting.
Georgia's like, okay, I got the iPad, what's next? Suivant on next.
Exactly. Oh, I'll enjoy the iPad too. I'm just waiting for the...
Nice.
Well, let's wrap this up. Seth, where do the senders find the senders? I'm still thinking about the watch phone. Where do the stalkers find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Seth Clifford. You can find me on the iMore Show and on Iterate with Rene and Mark Edwards of Bajango. And if you'd like to check out our work, some of the apps and sites that we build, please visit our website. It's nfidm.com. We're Nickelfish.
Sweet.
And they do amazing stuff, so take a look at them. And Rene, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Where do people find you?
You can find me at Rene Ritchie on Twitter. You can find me at iMore.com. Whoop. Georgia sneezes are contagious. Whoa. You can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find me on at www.imore.com. And you can find me on this podcast every week.
And I'm Georgia, and you can find me on Twitter at GeorgiaTIPB. And you can also find me on the website, www.imore.com.
Nice.
And, of course, you can reach all of us on Twitter at iMore. You can also email us at podcast@imore.com. Leave a comment when the website and the show goes live. We're here every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern at www.imore.com/live for all our podcasts, audio and video, including iPhone and iPad Live, Zen and Tech, Iterate, cmobilenations.com/shows. If you haven't already, please subscribe in iTunes and leave a rating. Helps people find us and means a lot to us. And special thanks to the iMore Accessory Store for sponsoring this podcast, and Audacity, and to everyone else that showed up live for the chat. And yes, there will be a Zen and Tech coming up right after.
Nice.
So stick around.
Stay here. Stay tuned.
No leave.
Are we done? Is that the news and we're out of here?
That's it.
Yep.
We're done.
End of line.